Hi, welcome to Government Economics. I'm Miss Beebe. This is a recording for those of you that are unable to attend the back to school night session, and also for those of you that attend and maybe want to hear some things again or some things that you missed. So, again, I'm Miss Beebe. A little bit about myself. So, this is actually something I've shared with some of my students just about me. So I am actually a Roseville High School graduate, and so I graduated in 2009. I really enjoyed my time there. Obviously, I'm back here, so I would be. Of course, teaching in the virtual academy is a fun extension of the district. I graduated from UC Davis. I have a degree in history, a degree in our minor in English, and then a master's in education. I really love having seniors. I love talking about life after high school, which that can be college, it cannot be. It's always a really fun group to have, so I always encourage kids to talk to me about it. Some other things about me, I love to ride my bike. I love to watch movies. I love chocolate. And in the pandemic times, which I love talking to people about what they've learned about themselves during the pandemic or what hobbies they've picked up. And I actually picked up gardening and I have purchased a small barbecue. And so I'm really into the outdoors. And I make jokes with my students about how I've learned that I'm really a suburban dad with my hobbies and what I've learned about myself with the pandemic. So, some of the things about me too. So, government. Oh, it's such a fun class. So, it is 9 weeks, and usually I get questions about from students and parents about how long that is. So, that's essentially till midterms. And so, this is a class where we kind of squish two subjects together. So, the first half is all about government, the midterm will be about government, and then the next day that we come back from midterms, it will be about econ. So, that doesn't mean that we completely forget about government or that we don't talk about economics with the government. Obviously, it's kind of hard to talk about the two without, talk about one without talking about both of them. But really, we do kind of keep that focus in the first 9 weeks and the second 9 weeks too. So, government, we're really going to learn the fundamentals of the US government and how to become a good citizen in that government. This class will focus on the US government. We do have a unit where we focus on kind of general categories and some examples of other types of governments. But specifically, especially because it's kind of half of a course, we really focus on the US government. Okay. In my class, and I try to really, and students seem to really appreciate the structure of this. At the beginning of every class, I have a warm up. And then at the end of every class, I have something called a daily goodbye. Those are available on Google Classroom, although I am going to be migrating some of that to Blackboard, as I'm sure more teachers will be doing. But that is something that is really helpful for me and it's helpful for your students. So, in kind of at its basic level, it is sort of, and especially there's two of them, those are kind of serve as my daily engagement pieces that you might have heard of. And so they're just extra evidence to prove that a student was in fact an attending class and was also completing assignments. But also, I will use those warm ups and daily goodbyes as mental health check ins, academic check ins, see if they need help. Sometimes it's review, sometimes it's new learning. And so I really encourage students to do those. They're short assignments that I think sometimes students can disregard, but they're actually really important to the class. So making sure that they're doing those is really important. In this class, especially with government and economics, it's always important to stay up on current events. We do CNN student news 3 times a week. The only reason why we do CNN student news, and this is a decision that the other government teachers and I made, is that they have a 10-minute segment every day that is really geared toward high school students. And it's written for high school students. And what's very nice is they have a good explanation of things. And so they will, if something's happening in the news that people generally have questions about, they'll kind of go and they'll teach about it. So, and they're also very serious about making sure that the news that they portray is much more down the middle. And so even just kind of straight up CNN news has a lot more commentary and things than like CNN student news. But there's, of course, other news sources out there, and we encourage kids to look at those too: podcasts, other news sources that relate to current topics on government. Okay. On Google Classroom, if I were a parent or a student that was really trying to kind of understand the everyday occurrences and the kind of framework, nuts and bolts of the class, I would go to the week at a glance. And so I post this both on Google Classroom and on Blackboard. And students always tell me how much they appreciate these week at a glance. And, even for me, it's really helpful. But what I'll put up there is I'll put the unit that we're in, the week that we're in, dates. I'll put the essential questions that we're kind of learning, or the objectives. And then there's a box at the top right that I have for teacher announcements. And so I always encourage kids to look at that one. And then throughout the week, I have the agendas. And so I post this pretty much at the beginning of every week. Of course, the agendas are subject to change depending on how much we get through. But at the end, in the bottom right box, I also put the homework that is due, that I will talk about my due dates in a moment. So if your student is absent, if you're trying to understand where we are in the unit, I would just automatically go to the week at a glance. And so there's one for every week. Late work and tests and quizzes. So I will provide all students with all in-class assignments and due dates. I'm definitely not someone that is shy or quiet about not mentioning due dates. And so I tell kids pretty much every day what work and due dates are coming up. But I found in virtual learning and online school that having kind of weekly assignments is really helpful. And so I started having due dates, and I'm doing this throughout this term. Any work that's kind of not finished during class is due the following Sunday at 11:59. I've designed this class to be in a way where kids shouldn't have tons and tons of homework if they're focused during class. And I'll talk about some ways that I'm trying to make sure that they're focused during class, because I'm sure, as you know, at home that can be a challenge for all of us. But pretty much the Sunday at 11:59 is kind of if you didn't finish the in-class assignments, you still have an opportunity to do that. Occasionally, I will post an assignment that will be like, you really didn't have class time for it, so I am expecting you to do it for homework. But more often than not, it's assignments that they've at least had a good chunk of class time where they can get at least the majority of it done. The exception to that is the CNN 10 form that I spoke about earlier, which is a Google form up on Google Classroom. It looks the same pretty much every CNN 10. That one is due the day it is assigned. And I decided to do that because, especially if students left that one kind of to do later, that often they weren't updated enough on the news. And so watching the news for that day, and if a student is gone and misses the CNN 10, I require them to watch the CNN 10 from that day. Late assignments are eligible for 70% credit. So as I tell my students, 70% credit means if you would have turned it in on time, that means that you probably would have got 100% credit, but because it's late, you get 70% credit. So they're eligible for up to 70% credit. And it's due the last day of the following unit. So if I'm a student, I have an assignment that is late, that is from unit 1, then the last opportunity I have to turn that in is the last day of unit 2. And kids will always know when the last day of the unit is, because that is when they will have a test. Okay. And that the last time is 11:59, the day of the test, PM. Okay. I'm also doing weighted categories for grading. So there's classwork and homework takes up 30%, tests and quizzes take up 40%, and projects take up 30%. So a lot of this information is in my syllabus if you want to see that on Blackboard or Google Classroom. Some notes about virtual learning. I learned a lot this last term in the fall teaching kids online, and I know that we did it somewhat in the spring, but especially doing the more synchronous kind of at the same time learning really takes on a life of its own. So here's some things that I want to give you more information about, and I've had some parents ask me about that, about both my class and other classes, but I'm sure you've seen your students on Zoom. Zoom is kind of the vehicle for so much of learning right now. And one thing that I'm really asking students to do and to really try and make sure that they can have available, but I know that there's some setbacks and obstacles to this, is I want students to turn on their camera, and I want them to leave it on for as long as they can. So the whole period would be preferable. I do know that some students have Chromebook issues, or there's Wi-Fi issues, and I'm really trusting you as the parent that if it's something where and I asked on my syllabus agreement if there were any problems with the camera, that you really try and help support them so that they can turn on their camera. I know that, oh gosh, I've had tech struggles throughout all of the pandemic times too. And so I feel for you if like it hurts your Wi-Fi or your Wi-Fi isn't that strong. And I will say that in my experience for myself and talking to other parents, that there can be a lot of miracles happening if people call their cable company sometimes, or taking in their Chromebook to their school site and getting it fixed can solve a lot of problems. But the reason why I'm so serious about this, and it's not so much, I'm just really trying to be hard on the kids and make sure that they're being good citizens, but it actually comes from, in the last few months, I should say, of last term, and especially last few weeks, I spent a lot of time getting to know my students in terms of talking to them about their mental health. And so I really noticed that a lot of grades were really going down in the last few months of last term. And so I started talking to students individually, and I would put them in separate breakout rooms in Zoom. And I noticed that their mental health was really struggling. And I talked to a lot of them, and I asked, what they thought would help. And really, in times of vulnerability and honesty, a lot of them said, it would help if we could see other people. And I noticed when I talked to students that especially had their cameras on a lot, that they felt more connected, that they felt better. And I know as a teacher, it's really hard to teach to just a screen of names. And that's not just for my own mental health. That is part of it, though. But I'm not seeing how things are landing with them, and reading facial expressions and seeing what's going on there is so helpful. And of course, making sure that your student, and I know how hard it is to get your student to, participate in class and be there. If I can see their face, that's a lot helpful for me to be like, okay, they're actually engaged. Another tool that teachers are using is GoGuardian. You might have heard of this already. And I really encourage you to encourage your students to use GoGuardian. What this is some software that the district purchased where teachers can see student screens. So in the beginning, when I first heard about that, I was like, ooh, that's kind of Big Brother. I don't know if I want to see. I'm absolutely a GoGuardian believer now. And it's not just a way for me to it's not just a kind of gotcha, you're not on task, although that is really helpful. And usually what I'm doing is and what's nice about GoGuardian is I can send them direct messages that pops right up on their screen, and they can chat with me in real time there too. And Zoom has a chat feature, but when they have so many windows open, it's easy for either me or them to miss that. But GoGuardian is much more like kind of in your face. But what's also really helpful about it is there's so many times where students are trying to communicate with me. They're absolutely on task, but they're saying things like, I don't know where this is. I'm trying to click on this, or this isn't working, or something's up with my Chromebook. And what's really nice is I can just go to their GoGuardian and see what they're seeing and direct them that way. Or if something won't open for them, I can force it to open on their screen. I completely understand if you're like, I don't want my students' teachers to see what they're doing. I promise you that I'm only looking at what they're doing when it's my class session. I have no interest in, it's their time. They can watch what they want on YouTube at lunch. I'm not doing that. So it's just really helpful, and it's really helpful so I can tell parents, especially when they're trying to understand what's going on. I have a much better idea, just like I would in the classroom when I would see what's on their screen or on their desk at the time. I'm also using Blackboard and Google Classroom. This class is primarily on Google Classroom. I find that to be very student friendly. A lot of students are still new to Blackboard. I'm fairly new to Blackboard, but I am utilizing the Blackboard for kind of additional information. Well, I should say it's the same information duplicated, a little bit easier to navigate if you're not a student in the class. Okay. Government. So I actually, oh, and you know what, this due date is wrong. I need to change that. But I told students actually about this this week. So there's a major project for government, and there's a lot to tell you about it. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. But this is the Government Community Political Service Project that is done by all seniors in the district. I did it back in the day. I have an older sister that did it back in the day. I very much see it as a rite of passage for seniors, but this is an event where I want students to participate in community and political service. So community service, trying to understand their community, and political service, trying to understand some functionings of government or institutions operated by people. So they need to attend at least 3 different events, and for a total altogether of 6 hours. And I have, we figured out, government teachers, we figured out in the fall how to have students do this to where they didn't have to do this in person. So in no way am I expecting students during this pandemic to go and attend something in person. I have had students do that, and I'm certainly not going to hold students back from that, but I'm also not going to hold students to attending in person. So all of this can be done virtually online. There's a lot more details on Google Classroom. It's under a topic that says community political service. I gave students some examples. So political service could be attending a school board meeting, watching court case proceedings, attending some kind of meeting of a political party or a proposition. There's lots on there. Community service, and that one is especially a little bit more difficult to do online, but my kids last term got really creative and we found some. So people will do things like help do research virtually. They might attend a webinar about how to help people. They might help raise money for something. They might write letters. It just depends. There's so many things. So the students actually have a proposal for me that they write out which events they're thinking about doing, and that's due the 31st of this month. And so I will sign off for them that what they're doing is in fact okay. I require all students for all of their events to get prior approval from me. And that's really to help them so that if they do something and I'm like, that's not really going to count for community political service, that's not a waste of time for them. I really ask that students try to do stuff as much as they can with official organizations. It's really great if students like pick up trash around their neighborhood, but I want them to have, something where they're attending something or they're setting up some kind of event. Again, kind of difficult during the pandemic, but the reason why I have students do that is because I've helped students over the years write resumes, and it happens almost every time where students are like, Miss Beebe, I don't have any experience to put down on my resume. What have I been doing with my life? And so this is kind of a way for students to really get some kind of resume or job application or college application things kind of at the, towards the end of their high school career. And I actually have had students that, have worked with organizations, worked with people, and that's actually helped them build connections for getting a job, getting into college, getting an internship, things like that. So I really want students to learn that and the communication that goes into working with organizations and those kind of things. They will be presenting the paper. Again, these dates are wrong. I apologize. I'll change these. They will be presenting so they do a write-up for 3 of the events that they attend. They also need to provide verification of the events that they attend. Again, more information on Google Classroom. That could be pictures, agendas, things like that, so they can take a screenshot of a Zoom that they're on or a webinar. And then they're going to do kind of an informal presentation on it in class that doesn't require any actual presentation, just the attendance verification that they used. So that's kind of the big project. It's actually due March 3rd, so it's the week before midterms. Okay, so here's some ideas. I suppose I went over some of these. So school board meetings. There's links up on Classroom that I put up on Google Classroom of some suggested things that they can do. Okay, so If your student, I haven't mentioned this yet, if your student needs help, especially with the community political service, I find that students are like, oh gosh, I just don't know what to do. It's always a good idea to just come in for Hub, and that really goes in for anything. So Hub starts at 1:50 and it goes till 2:35 in Roseville Academy. If students aren't able to make that, they're welcome to email me and we can set up an appointment. Economics. I kind of do a very, very quick version of economics just because I don't see parents before economics. We only get one back to school night, and so this is just a quick mention of it. We're going to learn the fundamentals of macro and microeconomics as well as consumer economics. So we'll talk supply, demand, scarcity, GDP. I get so excited just talking about and mentioning them, and how these forces shape our economy and our economic choices. So again, just kind of like government, we will have a unit where we talk about other types of economic systems, but primarily we will be focusing on the US economic system. There is a major project for economics, although I don't think it would require as much time as the community and political service project. This is called the Independent Living Project, which I like to refer to this one as a fan favorite of parents. What this is students are going to learn budgeting, and they're going to learn research for kind of living in the new world. So I'll give more information towards the beginning of the economics portion of the course, but students will be looking at apartments, they'll be looking at houses, they'll be looking at phones, they'll be looking at groceries. And so they'll kind of look at how much it costs, how to budget. We'll talk about those things. I'll try to teach them some skills about looking up those things. But typically why it's such a parent favorite is over the years, I've had conversations with students where they'll say, oh, I didn't realize it costs money every time I charge my phone, or I didn't realize how much a down payment for a car was, or things like that. So it's really very helpful. It can be a little bit sad to learn how expensive life is, but again, important to know. And I hope that they appreciate you all and everything that you do after that project. And I will say, even if they don't tell you this, a lot of them end up telling me that they really appreciate all of the work that you spend and the budgeting that you do as well. And then the very last project for Econ, which is an incredibly fun time for students and me, is Shark Tank. So if you've seen the show Shark Tank, essentially entrepreneurs pitch a new product or a service to sharks. The sharks are the investor. And so students will come up with a new product or service and we'll pitch it, and we will all be the sharks. And it's really an amazing project, not just because it's fun, but because it incorporates so many of the concepts of economics that we learn about. So it's a great capstone piece. So this will be their final. So again, if you need anything from me, or students do, Hub or by appointment is great. And I would definitely email me. I'm constantly on my email. I try really hard to get back to parents within 24 hours. If it's a little bit longer than that, it's probably just because I've had a heavy email volume day. But I'm sure that I will get back to you pretty soon at that point. So I'm here to support. I love working with teenagers. I'm sad I'm not with them in person. Especially seniors are such wonderful human beings. But I'm really, and especially in this time that we're living in, and I try to really emphasize this with them in classes. I want us to all support one another, and I know we're living in difficult times, and I hope that this class is interesting. I hope it's supportive. I hope it's a good representation of kind of what students want to learn about their government and their economy. So it's pretty special to me. So thank you so much.